Welcome to the Unfair Advantage series, where we explore the strategies, insights, and methodologies to give you an unfair advantage. I'm Mona Hilton, CEO of Advantage Anywhere, and we are so honored and so proud to bring you topics and guests that will stretch your mind, grow your business, and enrich your lives. If you have missed any of the previous amazing episodes of Unfair Advantage, or maybe you just want to binge watch topics that will improve your business and your life, check out the Unfair Advantage recordings at www.advantageanywhere.com/videos. And be sure to get on the notification list of upcoming episodes by emailing info@advantageanywhere.com. Well, today's topic is one I'm very excited about. It is the power of deep listening with our special guest, Gary Solomonson. I would tell you that sales is in Gary's blood. Gary has spent a lifetime in sales, ranging from magazine sales in junior high and high school to men's clothing sales in college, shoe stores and rental housing during graduate school. His undergraduate studies were in philosophy and speech and theater arts and languages. And in graduate school, he got a 4-year Master of Divinities degree. Isn't that impressive? With a combination of studies at Luther Theological Seminary and St. Thomas University and University of Minnesota. From 72 to 84, Gary worked 30 hours a week as a pastor and chaplain in multifamily senior living communities, and he developed a market research company doing feasibility studies for multifamily and senior living communities. In 84, Gary became the national director and later the vice president of sales and marketing development for a senior living management company with communities throughout the U.S. That is where Gary was when I met him. Gary is now transitioning his career to developing a new virtual consulting firm focusing on sales skill sets and competitive messaging research, a company called Vertical. Check him out. Now, I always like to say on a personal note, I met Gary in 2010 when he was looking for a solution. Gary stood out from the very beginning, not just because he always wore a bow tie, which is what he is famous for, but you're also about to hear why Gary made such a deep impression on me. So welcome to the Unfair Advantage, Gary. We're so honored to have you with us today.
Thank you, Mona. This is really a privilege. It's so good to see you again, too. My gosh, it seems like yesterday.
We haven't aged a bit, have we, Gary?
No, I look younger than ever.
Yes, of course. So, Gary, I'm so happy that you're here talking to us about deep listening. I feel like it's a lost art, and as I like to say, a deep subject. Would you mind starting off by sharing a little bit with us about what is deep listening? What does this mean?
Well, part of it has to do with understanding that many times we who are in sales need to patiently create an opportunity to listen carefully and deeply to our prospective customers. I guess I've discovered over the years that the real reason, the deep reason many customers spend time with you are seldom the things that they will begin talking about initially in a conversation. That it's usually the deeper reasons, what I call reasons of the heart, as opposed to reasons of the mind, where people, they want to get to know you a little bit as a person, as a salesperson. And most people subconsciously are with you as a salesperson because they want you to help them buy. They don't want to be sold. They want you to help them buy. And for you to help them buy, usually it's the much deeper reasons they are there to be with you that they sort of, hold back on talking about. And so developing the art and science of deep listening, I think, is really important for salespeople who want to build a relationship that creates an opportunity for your customer to really tie those deeper reasons to the benefits that your product or services can bring them.
I think that's really good. But, as I'm listening to you, I hear someone saying, so do I really need this deep listening? I mean, I've heard you describe deep listening as you just did as the most important skill set for leadership and for sales. Can I get away without it? Why is it so important, Gary?
Well, it all depends on the type of relationship you want to build with that customer. Most of us in sales, we're under the pressure to develop or to achieve our sales goal, let's say for the month, so on and so forth. And so we feel that pressure from corporate, from the regional, from the management. And so that head pressure is there. In terms of the heart, most salespeople who are there for all the right reasons in sales are people who have servant hearts. They want to help that prospect find what they're looking for. And so I think you can get away without doing it. But when you do that, I think you turn a sales situation into an interview and you focus just on needs. And it becomes a needs interview. In deep listening, a true professional realizes that matters of the heart sometimes have to do with wants and have to do with interests. And I've discovered in my career that while needs are important to identify and understand, to truly understand and have a feel for a person's interests and their wants, that sometimes those are the more significant motivators of why they're there. And it's through deep listening. It's through getting out of the head, getting into your heart and their heart when you look at those interests and those wants, because those are deeper in the conversation. And so I think one way to incrementally really improve one's ability in sales is to go deep.
Yeah, that's so true. Obviously, when we use the term deep listening, we're talking about their ears, and that implies that people are listening with their ears. But in your opinion, Gary, what does deep listening look like? How does it look?
That's a great question. And again, I think that we have to take a holistic view of this. All of us have the ability, for the most part, to listen with our ears. Now, when you're listening with your ears, are you listening mostly with your head or your heart, or have you balanced it out? But we have to also listen with our eyes. And I think it's really important to carefully sit and observe body language. I think we say as much with body language as we say with our words, and our gestures, the head nodding, other gestures. And as we look at body language, I think it helps us get more to feeling what the other person is feeling. A lot of times when I'm having a conversation with a client and we talk about how do they sit and feel what the other person is saying, how do they attach feelings to that words? And a lot of times we find ourselves talking about body language, not only the salesperson's body language, but the body language of the customer. So it's eyes and ears, observing facial expressions, looking at body language. Deep listening, if done well, includes all of that.
So Gary, I know this is a little off topic, but now in this world of communicating virtually the way you and I are doing right now, how do you translate that into deep listening?
I have really found that I've actually found that it's not only equal, sometimes I have found virtual better as your focus, because when it's the two of you, absent all the background noise going on, if you're an in-person environment, for example, people coming and going out of the office, lighting and all those other things. And of course, the virtual background has to be, thoughtfully prepared. But I find not only can you listen with your ears, but you can listen with your eyes. You can observe body language, because usually you're seeing people from the chest up, and you see arms on a table just like Mona's right now, and you see her shoulders, you see her head nodding, you see her smiling.
My coffee?
Her coffee cup. So I think that with practice, virtual can be just as effective as in person. And I know that we live in a world right now where some people in their mind's eye feel they want to get back to normal. I don't think normal is returning. I think we've turned the page and we're all starting a new chapter in our lives. I have met with some salespeople online right now that I knew in person. I find them even more effective online than they were in person. Now, when you get to having to give a tour of a community or to demonstrate your product, that's a little more complicated sometimes online than it is in person. But I think virtual can work very, very well.
Well, and I think too that, deep listening is something that I'm wondering if you feel that it is more of something you're born with, or is a skill set that you can develop over time, or is there a mixture? What are your thoughts on that?
It's probably a mixture. Certainly, one could build a case for that, but it is a skill. It is a skill set. In a little bit later, we're going to talk about laddering. That is a skill set, and we'll talk about how that is accomplished in deep listening. But I do believe it is a skill set. I think that one has to combine all the things we learned about active listening back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And every consulting firm in the country had a different version of active listening. And deep listening really includes many of the basics of deep listening. One of the practices that I'll talk about with clients is the importance of beginning a deep listening session by asking permission to take notes. Taking notes, physically taking notes, handing a pad of paper and a pen to a customer or a client as you're sitting there enjoying your coffee, maybe cookies and lemonade too. And for you to be making notes, it physically demonstrates you are listening. And basically, I encourage people to listen for keywords and the supporting reasons. And that's a real critical part of active listening, going way back to the days of Xerox listening training, which really dates me back into the 60s. But in doing that, in writing down a few keywords and a few supporting reasons, it also allows us to contemplate ways to ask a deeper question about a word or about a supporting reason. And we can talk about that a little bit more if you like. However, that is another visual demonstration of deep listening, taking notes, but asking for permission.
I totally agree with you, Gary. I think that, whether you're in a leadership role and you're speaking to people on your team, or whether you're in sales and you're selling, the temptation is always to think about what you're going to say next or what you're going to ask next. And when you're doing that, you're not deep listening. So the taking notes forces you to be in the moment, forces you to be present so that you can avoid that temptation. And it's something that, we're all working on, I think.
As I learned to say, working in the UK for 5 years, you're spot on.
I love that. So, I always say that success leaves clues. And I believe that what we learn in one industry can usually translate into other industries. But I'm wondering if you could kind of walk us through a practical example story about deep listening. What does that look like? So we can kind of wrap our brains around that.
Sure. I'm thinking of a fun story here. And I had an interview some years ago working in a CCRC in Virginia with a couple who came in, and the salesperson was out, and I had the opportunity to sit and visit with these people. And it was a great experience that taught me a very important lesson about deep listening. Long story made short, it was a couple, man and woman. The woman, the wife, she started out doing all the talking. And she said she's tired of taking care of the house, of dusting and washing clothes, doing the meals. And she just went on and on and on and on about it. And during this time, I'm watching George, her husband, who's sitting there, and he's kind of drifting off, in terms of not paying attention and kind of paying attention on occasion with different things she says. He would smile at a few things she said, and he would grimace at some other things. And I began to realize, as you know, as a deep listener, I needed to respond in some way to find out what's going on with George. So we began to talk. And throughout the conversation, I asked George a few questions about if he's anxious to get away from the house. And he told me, hell no, he loves to mow the lawn. He wants to stay home and don't want to move into an apartment building. My goodness, there won't be a lawn to mow. And he loves his gardening, and he wants to garden. I asked him a few more questions, and then I turned to his wife and I said, Kathleen, what are some of the other reasons y'all want to move into a senior living community like this? She says, well, I told you. I'm just tired of taking care of the house. It's just too much work. What I began to realize is that George had some early dementia, but there were some reasons he would not want to move. So I pursued the questions in a very gracious way with George, and I found out that the most prized possession in his life was his library. And his wife then commented and said, there's no way we can move all his books here. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we kind of work at that and see where we go? The end of this story is that I ended up doing a home visit. And when I did the home visit, I also discovered that he had been a very successful professor at the University of Virginia in Richmond, and that his library, with all of its rare books and new books, was his prized possession. He wanted to move, but not if he had to leave his library. So the deep listening in this situation led to my creating an offer where we would build some bookshelves for him in a second bedroom so he could move his library. And so that's just one example of many.
Wow, that's really good. And that's something that, had you not pursued it, had you just taken them at surface level, you would have never gotten there. And again, that can apply to anybody in any industry that's doing any kind of sales or leadership of sales as well. That's a really great story. I appreciate that.
The good stories are the true stories.
Yes, yes.
So,
Best examples. Now, you've mentioned laddering as we were talking too. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit more about what is laddering? How does that work?
Sure. Laddering in deep listening is simply going a little bit deeper. Again, when we began, I talked about that sometimes the deepest reasons are the hardest to bring up to the surface during a sales conversation or during discovery. And so laddering is continuing to ask the question why. The best teacher for any of you listening is to spend a couple of hours with a 3-year-old and show them something that you want them to talk about or something you do, and let them start asking why. And they will repeat the question probably 50 times. Well, why do you do that? Or why don't you do that? And laddering is asking the question why. Laddering is discovering the reasons, the heart reasons, as well as the head reasons, and why somebody would be interested in you as a salesperson, interested in the services or the product that you represent. And so taking time to go deep and ask the questions why. What laddering does, eventually it will connect the benefits that you offer your customer, will help tie to their deepest reasons, to their heart reasons, as well as their head reasons. So laddering brings you deep. I often talk about the head-heart connection that all of us in sales, again, have to be very sensitive to. In our head, we're under pressure to get a sale. In our heart, we have a servant heart and we want to help. And it's true for the prospect that's sitting there with us. In their head, they have some of the obvious, how much is your product cost? How does it work? And so on and so forth. but in their heart, they're looking to find a solution. I often talk about we in sales need to get rid of the sales mantras in our head, and we need to think of ourselves as healers, that we're bringing healing to a situation where somebody wants to solve something that concerns them. And that's looking at healing in a holistic sense and in a macro sense. Again, laddering, if done well and done graciously, will help you get to the deeper reason why somebody is sitting there with you. And it might take a couple of conversations and a few phone calls and a few online visits. But if you keep asking why in a gracious why, I've always felt that connecting the heart and the head really gives birth to wisdom. And what I love about deep listening, I think it creates an opportunity for salespeople to create a moment where the customer sees them as wise, as having taken time for them and listening to them. I always have maintained that listening is the single most important skill set any salesperson can learn about, develop, and practice. And it takes practice. And I encourage those of you thinking about deep listening, think about developing your approach to laddering. It can be fun. And in a moment, I'll tell you about one more positive aspect of laddering.
Yeah, as you're talking, Gary, I'm like really taking this to heart. And I'm thinking about the sales process. And I think too often, many of us, I'll say us, approach sales from a task. I've got to do this and I've got to get through this and I got to do that. And these are the steps. And I'm not saying that there aren't tasks involved, but I think the paradigm shift for me is not being task oriented, but being, like you said, heart oriented and really focusing on the problem, that putting yourself in their shoes and digging deep and digging, because I think a lot of times, like you said, they don't even know oftentimes what the real issue is. And it's our job in truly caring about people to dig and find out what their real issues are, what their real problems are. And then, like you said, being a healer and bringing answers to that. So I'm loving this myself, because I'm putting myself in those shoes and saying, how can I become better at not going through tasks, but going deep and listening and asking questions that reveal truth, real truth.
And as you were mentioning that, I thought of an additional thing that is really tied very directly to what you just said, Mona. People will say, well, why do I want to get into the heart thing? And to that, I'll say every need or interest or want. And again, you'll never know until you do effective laddering or deep listening what the driving force is for them to be there. Because in the heart, whether it's a need, an interest, or a want, there is an emotional connection that's there that has to be addressed. If the emotional connection is not addressed, the likelihood of a successful sales is diminished to a certain degree. So again, the head's important, the heart's important, and I've often said that wisdom is born when the two are balanced.
Wow, that's rich. I should be taking notes right now. This is really good. I'm glad we were recording this so I can go back and listen to it over and over again. Now, I know as you're transitioning into your new career, Gary, you're really focusing on the micro learning system. Would you be kind enough to explain to our audience what is micro learning, and give us a little bit of an idea about how you use it, how you work with people to train them?
Microlearning, the microlearning system that developing at Vertical is, it focuses on isolating, for example, I have an outline of 15 basic skill sets for sales, let's say, and one of those skill sets is deep listening. And so for deep listening, for example, there are 8 15-minute online virtual sessions with my clients spread over a period of 4 weeks. I then respond to each one with a written communication, and we continue that. And micro-learning is a way of isolating and, if you will, enhancing and perfecting an aspect of a skill set. And so it has to do with learning in the sense that learning about one aspect of deep listening and then practicing it for a day or two, then to come back and to review it together, go on to another coaching element, practice it for a few days, come back and review. So it's an iterative process of working back and forth together. I serve as a coach. The client wants to improve some aspect of discovery or some aspect of listening or some aspect of arrival experience or whatever it might be. And so it involves teaching, coaching, reviewing, and doing it over again over a period of time, so that in terms of behavior modification, we arrive at a point where we truly can become remarkable salespeople. And I'm always pushing people to think about themselves as being remarkable. And if they don't feel they're the best version of themselves, well, let's talk about it and work on it. And let's work on it over time. And micro-learning, I think, is one fun way to approach it.
So it sounds like you put all this together in a package. Is that true?
I have, yes.
Awesome. Well, we're going to talk a little bit in a minute about have generously given one of our lucky listeners a free offer. But before we get into that, I'm just curious, is there one takeaway? If there's one thing you want our audience to take away from today, what would you say that would be? Because we've covered a lot of ground and it's very, very rich. And I encourage everyone to listen to this multiple times because there are layers to it. He laddered us. But Gary, is there one particular takeaway that you want to make sure people get from today?
I think what's been exciting for me when I do deep listening and do laddering, I'm always astonished when the unexpected surfaces. And I have found more times than not, it's that unexpected reason why they're talking to you, that unexpected reason why they're taking time with you. It's that unexpected reason why they're really there, and it just sort of pops out. And I think that deep listening will help you find the unexpected. It won't always happen, but it happens more times than not. And when it happens, that unexpected piece of information, that tidbit, becomes a jewel in its own way that really brightens and enriches the sales relationship that you have with a prospect.
And without deep listening, virtually no chance of revealing that unexpected jewel, as you described it.
It's limited for sure,
Yeah.
but that makes it a lot of fun. It makes it a lot of fun. And just like the library story, that was the unexpected jewel. The minute he knew we would build some shelves for him to move his library, the sale was done then and there. No more selling, just do the paperwork, build the shelves, and move his library. And he was happy as could be. And of course, she was too, because her real reason for being there was her fear she'd have to take care of George living with dementia in their home. So a lot was revealed through that unexpected library moment.
Yeah. And especially, and again, this translates to all industries, but especially in senior living, when there are multiple people involved in that decision-making process, their reasons are different, very different,
Yes.
oftentimes.
Yep, absolutely.
And you won't know that unless you're doing the deep listening, the deep work.
The deep work.
Yes, right. I love that. So Gary, I want to thank you. I want to let the audience know that Gary has offered us a free micro learning system to one lucky listener. So about a week from today, we're going to draw a name to receive a free micro learning system with Gary himself. It's about a $650 value. To me, it seems like it's worth a lot more than that. But if you would like to get into that drawing, email us. The email is on the screen. It's support@advantageanywhere.com. Mention Gary Solomonson, and we will draw a lucky listener. and you will have the honor, the privilege, I promise you, this man is rich, of working with Gary himself on his micro-learning system. So by all means, send in an email to support at Advantage Anywhere about that. Is there anything you want to add to that, Gary?
Yeah, that certificate would be just for the 8 sessions for deep listening. That's the intention there. Happy to do that for as a gift to one of your listeners.
That's awesome, Gary. Thank you so much for your generosity. And thank you so much for being here, Gary. I think we were talking earlier, have known you for what, 11 years?
Yes.
So, wow, it's such an honor to connect with you again. Just wisdom. As you can hear, everything he says is something that you could quote or tweet in this case. So, anyway.
Good time.
Thank
Go
you.
Advantage Anywhere.
Yes, I love that. So for those of you joining us today, I want to thank you so much. It has been an honor to have you on today's Unfair Advantage. We encourage you to register for future episodes and watch some of the previous ones. They are also amazing. You will enjoy it. You will be enriched. And thank you again for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you on the next Unfair Advantage episode. Have a great day, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks.